Hi, my name's Phi, and if you have 3 quick minutes, I want to share with you a life-changing lesson that I gained thanks to my parents. This is where we live now, and this is a life that they've built themselves working over 30 years in business. But let's go back to when they started with nothing. My parents were refugees who escaped to Australia in 1979 after the Vietnam War. Mum escaped to Malaysia on a fishing boat crammed with over 300 other refugees. During the 7 days that they were at sea, the boat was hijacked 3 times by pirates and they robbed everybody of all their valuable possessions. After arriving to Malaysia, my mum was told to relocate to a proper camp by the government, but the ship was actually on course back to Vietnam. The ship that was towing the refugee boat had intentions to sink the boat and the 300 refugees it was carrying. The ship carelessly pulled them along, ignoring cries from children and the elderly, begging them to slow down. They eventually abandoned the refugees in the middle of the ocean without any fuel or food, only water. My mum went 15 days without food. On the 15th day stranded at sea, a German ship miraculously crossed paths with the boat and agreed to tow the refugees to the closest Indonesian island where Mum stayed for another 7 months at the camp before being accepted into Australia. But the story doesn't end here. This is where it actually begins. The first 5 years in Australia, Dad took up any job he could find. Most were factory jobs. He was doing 50+ hours a week during the day, and at night he studied English. After 5 years working for corporations, my parents finally decided that they wanted to work for themselves, and so they started selling goods at the markets. My parents worked at the markets for 15 years. In those 15 years, they managed to make enough to buy a Attribution store and establish a small business that they could call their own. Business was good, so good that they had to acquire a warehouse to keep up with demand. At this point in time, my parents also began importing internationally. This was their beginning in the wholesale industry. Success leaves clues. One business led to the next, and my parents opened up another store which eventually became self-sufficient. Over the course of 20 years, through hard work and dedication, they finally earned enough to build the life that they had always dreamed of. What did every stage in their life have in common? My parents had courage and they were completely fearless. By the time they were in their 20s, they had already overcome several encounters with death. Nothing they faced later in life could ever compare. When my parents were standing face to face with death as teenagers, they had no choice but to fight for their lives. None of what you see now seemed possible back then, but I like to think that everything happens for a reason. Nothing is scarier than death. Nothing is scarier than not living. However, death is also inevitable. When we're standing face to face with our fears, we should not look away because we can't hide from them forever. My parents confronted every situation and every problem that was presented to them despite how scary the circumstances seemed. Because the scariest thing in their minds was not being able to fully live the life that they were given.